Okay, so we're on 6C, the sine rule. All right, and we're learning another rule, a little bit like the cosine rule, Harry, but it's got different application. So, 6C sine rule, and what it is, it's like how we've got our cosine rule. Remember how we had, if this is angle A, this is side A, this is angle B, this is side B, angle C, side C. So we still take that triangle, but the sine rule says side A on top of sine A is equal to side B on top of sine B is equal to side C on top of sine C. So that's true, but also the reciprocal of it is true in that sine of A on top of A is equal to sine of B on top of B is equal to sine of C on top of C. So we're going to take that relationship and we're going to solve some of these problems with it. So let's look at the first one. I've got this triangle here. I've got 60 degrees, 80 degrees, X, and I've got 7. Alright, so when we're trying to solve for a side, alright, I think it makes sense to use the top one. It doesn't matter really because you can just rearrange anyway, but there's just less algebra if we use the top one. If we're trying to solve for an unknown side, we'll use the top one, and if we're solving for an unknown angle, we'll use the bottom one. So here we've got this unknown side, right? We've got X, we want to say, what's the length of this side? So the first thing we're going to do is label this triangle, alright? So if we have, this is angle A, then this is going to be side A, and if this is angle B, this is going to be side B. Alright, and so we have side A on top of sine of angle A. So the side of A corresponds, let's write that out first, equals B on sine B, and then let's just perform the substitution. So side A corresponds with 7. So I'm going to have 7 on top of. Angle A corresponds with 60 degrees. So we've got 7 on top of sine 60. Now, side B is X. That's what we're trying to find. We're trying to isolate X by itself, right? So we've got X. And angle B is 80 degrees. So on top of sine of 80. Okay, we want to get X by itself. So all we're left with to do is to multiply both sides by this denominator. So I'm going to multiply this side by sine 80 and this side by sine 80. And you can see it cancels here. I've got X by itself. And so then this is what we're putting in our calculator. Sine of 80 multiplied by 7 on top of sine 60. Alright, that's what we're going to evaluate. So we'll do that quickly. And you need to make sure our angle's given to us in degrees. So that means we need to have our calculator set in degrees. So we've got sine of 80 equal sine of 80 multiplied by 7 on top of sine 60. Now when you're doing a calculation like this, it's important that you have each component of the calculation in its appropriate position. Alright, so the 7 is not at the bottom, 7 is at the top, sine 60 is at the bottom, and it's sine of 80 multiplied by this fraction, right? So when we evaluate that, I've got 7.960, which is 7.96. So again, writing the 4 figures and rounding the 4th one. Okay, I'll just take you through what we did really quickly. We've labelled the triangle, alright, we just labelled A and B. We only need 2, we don't need to do the C as well, but that's just pointing out that all of the relationships maintain. Okay, so we're solving for a side, so we're using the top one. Here I've just written out the equation. In the next step, I've substituted in the respective components, and then I'm processing it. Okay, let's look at the next example. So this time we're solving for an angle, right? Okay, we've got M, m degrees. We don't know the size of that angle, we're trying to find it. This is 10, and this is 8, and this is 75. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is label it. It doesn't really matter what we ascribe as A and what we ascribe as B. Alright, so I'm going to call this angle A, so that means this is side A. This is going to be angle B, so this is side B. Alright. Now, because I'm solving for an angle, I'm going to use this form. So I'll write out the first two. Sine of A on top of A equals sine of B on top of B. Alright, so that's just the formula. Then I'm going to substitute in the respective components. So M corresponds with angle A, right? So I've got sine of M. Alright, sine of M. Side A is 8 units. Angle B is 75. And side B is 10. Okay, now we're trying to isolate angle M by itself. That's what we're trying to solve. So first we're going to multiply both sides by 8. We're going to get rid of this denominator. Right? We're going to put 8 times here and times 8 over here. That's going to cancel. I'm going to write it like that. Okay, so to just show you I've isolated sine of M. And if we want to get M by itself, then we can perform the inverse sine. Okay, we're going inverse sine of whatever this evaluates to, yeah? Okay, so remember we can evaluate it and perform the inverse sine of it, and that's going to be our answer in degrees. So we'll do that one. Alright, we've got 8 times sine 75. Now let's just point out where people can make an error here. 8 times sine 75, like putting this in your calculator, is going to be different from putting this in your calculator. Alright, because there is a possibility that the calculator will evaluate this, 75 times 8, and then just change your angle massively, right? And so instead, make sure you're using brackets generously. Okay, using brackets generously is going to make sure it's evaluating that, then multiplying it by 8, then dividing it by 10. Okay, so we've got that, divided by 10, and then inverse sine of our answer. I've got 50.60 degrees, 50.6. Okay, we're writing 4, rounding to 4. So this is the sine rule, alright. Again, we'll do a little bit of both where we find angles and find sides. So if you look at our checklist on the front, there's quite a few questions. I'll just select a few again. But the same rule applies, right? Like I recommend doing all of them, of course. But if you want to spend some time on your folio, there will be some time today. I'll just say one more thing. Have a read of the text when finding an unknown angle, all right? It says, often we can't just write the answer, we need to check to make sure it satisfies the triangle. And so there's an investigation you can perform on page 105 to check that out. But for now, I think we'll just go through some fairly basic ones together, in your books separately, sorry. So, 6C, I'll choose a few questions, that's what we'll work on today.